So now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to have the honor to introduce our first speaker for today's session. Mira Yusef is the co-founder and current executive director of Monsoon United Asian Women of Iowa. She was a December 2007 recipient of a master's in social work with a specialization on community organizing and a master's in Southeast Asian studies from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. Mira is also a founder and steering committee member of the new organization called the National Organization of Asians and Pacific Islanders Ending Sexual Violence, NAPASEV, and a new national organization to provide technical assistance to culturally and linguistically appropriate Asian Pacific Islander organizations in order to provide services to API survivors of sexual assault. I know I've just shared with you a little bit of a formal introduction of Mira, but I would also like to share a short video that will tell you a little bit more about Mira. So we could show the video, please.
Magsaysay Boulevard in the morning is very quiet. I pass by different clubs, bars, restaurants, and the big American Legion building, and then I turn right to St. Columban Elementary School. I moved to Olongapo City when I was 7 years old. That was 1975. It was 3 years after Marcos declared martial law. U.S. Subic Naval Base was located in Olongapo City. The Philippines was colonized by Spain for 377 years and the United States for 50 years. Two military bases, Subic Naval Base and the Clark Air Force Base, symbolize the continued presence of the United States. The surrounding towns around the bases were economically dependent on the military bases. And it just happened that my mom's uncle owned businesses in Olongapo City. A club, a hotel, a restaurant, and apartment buildings. My mother, who became a single mother after my father died from a motorcycle accident, began working for her uncle and moved us to Olongapo from Pampanga around 1975. Olongapo City has this certain reputation, so my mother's relatives told her not to bring her children, especially daughters, but she did. She also wanted the best for us, so she enrolled us in a Catholic school. I attended a Catholic school while living in a hotel named Travel Inn Hotel, catering to U.S. military men and prostituted women. At the age of 9, or I think 10 years old, I knew what short time means. At the age of 11, I was asked sometimes to be in the front desk to basically check in customers. But there are funny moments. The sign behind the counter, no marijuana allowed in the premises, and me wondering why a woman named Marijuana is not allowed inside the building. But there is also this shame. One day I was hanging out in front of the hotel, and the security guard from my school passed by and had this look in his face. And he asked me, "Why are you hanging out in the front of this hotel?" And I answered him, "I live here."
Please join me in welcoming Mira Yusef.
Sorry, it always, for some reason that story is always, I feel teary-eyed. And the reason why I chose that, it's because I know there's a lot of military personnel who are here. So when we think about military sexual assault, let's not forget about the ones who are outside those bases, who are not maybe service people. Let's think about like war as a tactic of, rape as a tactic of controlling people as well. So the reason why I specifically wanted to share that, because of that reason, is like not forgetting about the ones who are outside the military, about the women, specifically women from the Philippines, Okinawa, and now maybe Guam, and not forgetting about that. But anyway, my name is Mira Yusef, and the story is my story. a story that I cannot share or discuss with my mom, but can basically share it with all of you. A part of me that I was ashamed to share, but finally had the courage to share, specifically with the youth that I was working with in 2010 as part of our youth digital storytelling project. I am one of the founders of Monsoon United Asian Women of Iowa and currently serving as the executive director. Monsoon United Asian Women of Iowa is based in Des Moines, and also one of the founding members and one of the steering committee members of the National Organization of API Ending Sexual Violence. I share this story because it is quite difficult to separate my own story with the story of the work that I am doing with Monsoon. My own story, my family's story, my community's stories are intertwined, that discussing only one story is not full or the whole story. So basically, this story had deeply informed my work. And I believe that before I can even have the vision of the future, or even to imagine what the future will be like, it is important for me to have this grasp of the past. I'm a history major, that's why I love history. So I immigrated to the United States during my early teens in 1983. I'm an immigrant. Prior to my family immigrating to the United States, I lived in Olongapo City. The U.S. Subic Naval Base was located in Olongapo. In my opinion, Olongapo was an excellent breeding ground for future feminists because the city was known for its prostitution. I attended a Catholic school, and the walk to my school every day through Magsaysay Boulevard, the main street, which is also the red light district, is, in my opinion, a step towards feminism. Because the walk to the Catholic school and back home included seeing Filipinas in front of the clubs, bars, waiting for customers, especially when huge military carriers such as the USS Enterprise were stacked for days. I also noticed that there was a separate red light district for African American military men, and the area was called the Jungle. As a young girl, I did not understand nor have the language to explain the objectification, the selling of women for sex, and or separation of pleasure, or the separation of the pleasure seekers who are African descent. But I know deep inside that there was something wrong. My childhood also included the experience in living under the Marcos dictatorship. In 1972, then President Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law because of the threat from the leftists or the communists and the Muslim separatists. The freedom to critique the government was prohibited. Political activists went underground because the Marcos regime imprisoned, murdered, or exiled the opposition. Even at home, we were not allowed to discuss politics, for we were afraid to disappear. So my migration to the United States provided me the space to critically think of my experiences in the Philippines. It gave me the freedom to name those experiences, the freedom to be angry of all the injustices that I have seen, and the freedom to learn and name those oppressions, but also the freedom to learn about liberation. I learned about the tradition of liberation from the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, the women's movement, the Chicano movement, the Native American movement, the Asian American movement, the labor movement, about liberation theology, about Filipino farm workers who organized for better work environment, about the struggle of people of color, about anti-colonialist movement from South America to Africa to Asia. For good reasons, I love learning about colonialism and imperialism, for within the narratives of those oppressions, there were narratives of liberation. I was fascinated with Filipino men who left the Philippines to study in Europe during the Spanish colonization. Europe provided the Filipino men the space, the freedom to name their experiences and to adopt values such as nationalism, liberalism, social democracy, hence the beginning of movements. It's ironic that the Spain that oppressed the Filipinos also provided them the tool to liberate themselves. If we look at history, Europe and after 1898, the United States had provided the space for future leaders of emerging nation states. The Filipinos who were European educated became the intellectual vanguard of the independence movement, and the movement against the Marcos dictatorship followed the same trajectory. Filipino activists who left for safety in the United States and Europe continued their activism against the dictatorship. Transnational activism against the dictatorship in the same countries that support and sustain the dictatorship. So there's a lot of contradictions. Because of my interest about my own identity, because of my otherness, oh, sorry. Okay. I'm really a fast talker. So I'm gonna slow down. I became conscious about different struggle and the different movement, and the United States provided me that space, the opportunity. Hence, I would like to talk about space. 2 days ago, Ms. Faye Washington mentioned right timing and momentum. I would like to add that space is as important as the timing. When provided a space, especially a space that is nurturing, not only that we can imagine a movement, but it can also be realized. One of the most nurturing space for me was the San Francisco Bay Area. The San Francisco Bay Area has been a space for me to name my experiences. The two important organizations that have touched my life are the San Francisco Asian Women's Shelter and Gabriela Network, now called Affirm. These two organizations have assisted me in naming my childhood experiences. The Bay Area has been the space where I have learned the theoretical background, but was too distracted that I did not have the tools, and I also did not have the tools to fully apply it. The Bay Area was too much fun. It was distracting. Then, my path had led me to move to Iowa in 2001. Oh, sorry. The move to Iowa had allowed me to create a space to apply what I have learned from SF, AWS, and GapNet. For some reason, Iowa was less distracting space, and I was bored. I did not have a lot of things to do, so I created my own things. So the founding of Monsoon United Asian Women of Iowa was out of that boredom. You know, I was bored. So in 2003, I have basically with the inspiration from the women who have touched my life, like Christy Chong, Mimi Kim, Becky Masaki, and Raquel and Nelia Sancho, and countless of other women of color. So armed with this inspiration of AWS, a mainstream organization, the Iowa Coalition Against Sexual Assault, specifically Beth Barnhill, had helped me to basically establish Monsoon. So basically I went to Beth and said, hey Beth, you know, I would like to start an organization specifically for the API. This is out of boredom. And she said, yes, go for it. So they hired me as an AmeriCorps member in 2003. And for 1 year I was basically organizing in Iowa. So as an AmeriCorps, I basically have created a space for the API communities in Iowa to be part of the movement to end gender-based violence. So Monsoon is an important space for me. It is the space where my vision of an authentic social justice organization can be manifested. Deep inside, because I have missed the Bay Area so much, so I have this vision of bringing the Bay Area energy to Iowa, which is really a struggle, but it's all good. So why is that? The Bay Area has been the space where my experiences in the Philippines were named. The long history of Asian activism and other social justice activism molded my own thinking and has allowed me in naming those experiences. Hence, the importance of creating a space has been my strategy in community organizing and in establishing Monsoon. So Monsoon United Asian Women of Iowa was basically established to provide services to API victims, survivors of gender-based violence, and in organizing communities in Iowa to end gender-based violence with a social justice, anti-oppression, anti-imperialism, anti-colonial framework. So in December 2007, I just basically got my MA in social work and also Southeast Asian studies from Michigan. Monsoon became a separated organization. It was funded by the state. So they had asked me to return to Iowa. So I thought I will only stay there for 3 years, and I'm still there. So I returned to Iowa to run Monsoon after graduate school since no one was stepping up from the API community for the job. So using the tools I have learned from graduate school, I did a community assessment. So basically that was the first activity that I did. Now I have the tools. So in order to be inclusive, I made sure that API youth are included in the community assessment. It was also troubling to me that no one from the community, specifically the API community, was stepping up to say, yes, I'm gonna run Monsoon, I'm gonna do this. Instead, someone who's outsider came in and did the work. So from this, it was the birth of our youth programming. It was crucial that API youth from Iowa are included in everything that we do. We also included the youth because of the elders in the API communities in Des Moines were not interested in talking about gender-based violence and specifically sexual violence. The inclusion of the youth within Monsoon was very intentional. Sustainability is not only about funding, but it is also about people who will step up to volunteer, to be staff, and to lead the organization in the future. So for us, we have to invest in the youth. And also we are willing to, and also like part of this is also who are willing to break the silence about sexual violence. So Monsoon ensured that the organization provided a space for the youth, but not just a space, but an authentic space for the youth. Authentic means to me, not, for example, like not naming the youth council as advisory youth council. For one of the youth basically pointed it out. Do you know, Mira, that if you put advisory, it means that you don't really have to listen to us. So therefore I said, okay, let's take that off. So it just became a youth council. So authentic means that we ensure that there is a budget as well, that how small, even the budget is so small that it's important that there are youth in the program. Like even just, if it's just like they work 5 hours per week, to make sure that they are also like being paid because they need that, you know, they want to do something, they want to shop. So also authentic for us means listening to what they think is the most effective in working with their own peers and having them lead the planning, the implementation, and also the evaluation of their activities. So they are part of every step. And for us, that is authentic because they are like, you know, you're just not asking them haphazardly, you know, you're like very intentional in doing that. So now, 5 years after we started the Monsoon Youth Program, we basically have hired Helen Dow as our youth program coordinator this summer. And I have known Helen since she was 6th grader. And now she's a first-year college student and running our youth program. Since evaluation is very important in violence prevention and in programming in general, the hiring of a youth who has been part of the program for me is a success. The API population in Des Moines, Iowa, and in Iowa in general is very small. Hence, qualitative assessment has been our method in assessing the effectiveness of the programming. So youth asking me to quit my job because they want to take over, that's for me, that's like a good assessment. Or asking me, hey Mira, can you wait for 5 years because that will be the time that I will be graduating and then I can take over your job and then you can move out of Iowa. So for us, you know, so they're even like telling me, hey, I'm planning to take nonprofit management classes, you know, so I'm preparing. So for me, that was really an assessment because that means that they are ready and they are interested. And it also receiving an email from one of our youth interns who basically like disappeared, like never showed up to work, and there was a reason why. But all of a sudden she emailed me and say, hey, you know what, thank you very much. I'm so sorry if I was flaky, but thank you so much for providing that space and letting me be who I am. So for us, that is an assessment of effectiveness. It is also when when youth that we're working with are finally talking to their parents about their story, asking them, like, who are you? How did you get to the United States? What is your struggle? What is it like to be a refugee arriving in Iowa? So that was never a conversation in the past with the youth. So finally, they are talking to their parents. And now they are no longer ashamed because their parents cannot speak English, or maybe they have an accent. So for us, that's also an effective assessment because that means that we are succeeding in our goal. And in addition, it's like, in addition to this assessment is also an intern asking me, can you pretend to be my mom because I want to get a tattoo? And I'm like, hell no, no, because you might ask me to pay for that as well. So no. So for us, it was really important when they can come to you and say that without like this, hesitation. So I can go on and on and on to share about so many moments with the API youth who I work with and have participated in our programming to basically illustrate how the impact that we are doing in the API community. So for us, violence prevention is not only about intimate, healthy relationships, but also healthy relationships with family, with the community. In creating our youth program, we are so much rooted in what are the ways in inspiring the youth in being active in the community, and most important, be comfortable in naming and challenging oppression. So the statements, questions, requests, stories have been our method in assessing if we are successful in providing that authentic, nurturing space for the youth, because that was my experience. I did not understand what was going on with me in Olongapo City, what was the cause. But a space like the Bay Area, or even women who have touched my life, basically have nurtured me to now, running an organization, being a feminist. So for us, it's really important that a space is important to create that will not only allow youth to imagine a movement, but also a space to ensure that they are part of the movement. Thank you.